Last night, the government kept using the phrase intergenerational equality when talking about housing reforms. But the more I actually read the policy, the more I think these reforms may do the exact opposite. Because when you follow the incentives, when you follow where the capital actually flow, what you realize is this doesn't really distribute wealth. It protects the people who already have it and changes the rules for people still trying to build it. Now, on paper, this all sounds reasonable. Limit negative gearing, reduce speculative investment, help first home buyers, build more homes, create intergenerational fairness. Sounds good. But when you actually look at the numbers, the government themselves estimate all these housing reforms combined will help only around 75,000 homeowners in the next 10 years. That's about 7,500 people per year in a country with millions of renters and one of the worst housing affordability crises in the developed world. And at the same time, inflation is still elevated, government spending is still enormous, and interest rates remain structurally high. So let me ask you a very simple question. If mortgage rates stay higher, cuts your borrowing capacity by 100,000, 150,000, maybe more, what exactly does the $19,000 reduction in median house prices achieve? Because this is the part nobody actually wants to talk about. House prices are not the only thing that determines affordability. Borrowing capacity does, cash flow does, interest rates do. You can make housing slightly cheaper while making them dramatically less affordable at the exact same time. And then we get to the really interesting part, negative gearing. Now, the government says they're removing incentives from investors to help younger Australians. But who actually loses the concessions? Not the people who have already built wealth over the last 20 years. Those people are grandfathered in. If you already own the assets, you keep the old rules. The people who lose the concessions are the people trying to build wealth now. And that's the contradiction. Because it isn't really redistributing wealth. It's freezing the existing hierarchy in place. The older generation got falling interest rates, cheap housing, massive leverage expansion, strong capital growth, and full tax concessions. The younger generation, they get higher prices, higher rates, smaller borrowing capacity, and reduced tax advantages. And somehow we're calling that intergenerational equality. But the part I think people completely miss is what happens next, because investors don't just disappear, they adapt. And if you remove the attractiveness of capital growth investing, investors will start chasing yield, cash flow. And where are the highest yielding properties usually found? Cheaper suburbs, outer suburbs, regional areas. So that just happens to be the exact part of the market first home buyers compete in. So what may actually happen is investors stop buying premium blue chip property and start buying entry-level housing instead. Meaning younger Australians don't face less competition, they just face different competition. And then we get to the most dangerous part of all of this. The government is now heavily incentivizing investment into new builds. That sounds logical until you realize what's happened to the construction industry over the last 6 years. Construction costs exploded. Developers stopped building because projects no longer stacked up financially. Margins disappeared, financing costs exploded, labor shortages intensified, and now the government is effectively telling young Australians, don't buy the scarce established assets older generations used to build wealth, buy the new stock instead. But historically, a lot of the new build property, especially high-density apartments and fringe developments, have underperformed established land-rich housing over long periods. Why? Because the real wealth in Australian property has usually come from scarce land, not the building itself. Buildings depreciate, land appreciates. Older generations built wealth through established homes on scarce land close to cities. Younger Australians are now being pushed towards off-the-plan apartments, fringe estates, high-body corporate stock, and inflated construction cost housing. One generation used housing to accelerate their wealth. The next generation is being encouraged to use housing just to survive. And here's the part that really bothers me. Australia says it wants to be productive with its investment. We say we want to innovate, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, business creation. But look at the incentives. If you start a business and succeed, the government wants a larger share of your upside through capital gains tax reform. But if your family home doubles in value while you sleep, still tax-free. So what's the rational thing Australians will do? They'll pour even more money into their primary residence because it remains one of the most tax-advantaged assets in the entire country. And that means we still haven't solved the core problem. Australians' economy remains completely dependent on housing. Housing drives household wealth. Housing drives consumer confidence. Housing drives bank stability. Housing drives politics. And once your entire economy depends on ever-rising property values, no government can truly afford to make housing affordable. Which means these reforms aren't really designed to reset the system. They're designed to manage the consequences of the system without breaking it. And that's why I think the phrase intergenerational equality is so dangerous here. Because real intergenerational fairness would mean giving younger Australians access to the same wealth building opportunities previous generations had, not changing the rules after the wealth has already been accumulated. And until Australia fixes the actual supply side of housing, planning, zoning, construction costs, infrastructure development, all we're doing is redistributing pressure inside a broken market. And the people carrying most of that pressure, they're still the younger generation.